Hello, friends, and welcome to Pieces Here. I'm your host, Avis Kolfsbeck. This is the next to last episode in the Wolff Peace series, which began at episode 45, where we paired the thinkers in Robert Paul Wolff's Political Man and Social Man with peace warriors from across history. Each episode is a conversation between power and peace, between the world as it is and the world we are still imagining. Today is our fifth and final recap of Wolff's Individual and Society section, and it's a fitting end. We've arrived at the paradox of social control, the strange dance between freedom and structure, identity and conformity, democracy and discipline. In these closing chapters, Wolff asks a fundamental question. Does society have the right to interfere with an individual's life purely in order to help him? John Stuart Mill famously said no. Dostoyevsky's Grand Inquisitor famously said yes. And Wolff, as usual, says, well, let's think about it. Let's begin with George Homans. Homans gave us one of the most quietly haunting images in the entire book, a group of factory workers subtly manipulated through care. The Western Electric research revealed that workers would increase productivity not because of fair wages or ideal conditions, but because they were made to feel seen. This wasn't justice. It was what Wolff called a sad and perverse system of seduction, dressing up surveillance as support. Next is Erving Goffman, who showed us how our very identities are shaped by what he called total institutions, places like prisons or asylums where every element of life is controlled. In such spaces, even your self-image can collapse without the props that sustain it, your clothes, your habits, your relationships. He wrote, the structure of a personality can be analyzed into the repertory of roles which the individual sustains. Wolff reminds us that when roles are denied, we don't become free, we unravel. Then comes John Stuart Mill, who built a mighty wall around the individual with his famous essays on liberty. Mill believed the state should only interfere to prevent harm to others, but as Wolff points out, this framework breaks down when we acknowledge that harm is social, that we are formed and sometimes deformed by our need for approval. This leads Wolff to David Reisman's final echo: unless a person already has a strong sense of self, they won't even feel society's control as pressure. They'll feel it as purpose. And then Dostoyevsky, his Grand Inquisitor, says, don't give people freedom. They can't bear it. It's a cynical yet chilling defense of control, structure as salvation. So what is the paradox? It's that some form of social control is necessary to make a person, but the more subtle it becomes, the harder it is to resist. Mill's fear of tyranny might not come from the state, but from the smile of your supervisor, from the softness of someone else's plan for your life, from the fear of letting someone down. Into this complex web, we invited some of the most courageous humans to have resisted unjust control and rebuilt it in gentler form. Sophie Delaunay, whose work with Doctors Without Borders placed her in the heart of health emergencies where institutional control could either save lives or erase humanity. Eleanor Rathbone, a parliamentarian who challenged the institutional cruelty of the poor laws and fought for family allowances, not charity, but justice. Eleanor Roosevelt, who helped shape the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, reminding the world that dignity requires both freedom and a social foundation. And Nelson Mandela, whose decades in prison did not erase his dignity, but rather sharpened it into a leadership that redefined freedom itself. Wolff might have asked, if society shapes the very values by which we critique it, how can we ever claim to stand outside it? In truth, we don't, but we can shape it back. The thinkers and peace warriors in this section show us that control and care are always intertwined. The goal is not to escape society, but to make it more just, more honest, more human. As Francis Bacon, the English philosopher and early theorist of scientific method, wrote, The very values which guide our use of power are themselves instilled in us by the society we are attempting to change. And in a time when our democracy feels fragile and social pressure tightens, voices like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez remind us this is our moral moment. It's not left or right, it's right or wrong. That kind of moral clarity is called for when we're testing the limits of authority and loyalty. Senator Cory Booker adds that real change requires convictions with courage and ideals with action, reminding us the struggle for peace and integrity begins within each of us. And so we become both subject and sculptor, formed by our world and forming it still. Peace questions to ponder. Big picture. Is there such a thing as truly benevolent control? What's the difference between identity and performance, and does society reward one more than the other? What hidden roles do you play to maintain your front? What would it take to lay them down? Day-to-day life. What social scripts are you following out of habit, not choice? Where in your life do you mistake approval for purpose? Can you trace one of your values, say hard work or kindness, back to the institutions that taught it to you? Coming up next in our final episode in the Wolff Peace series is a full series reflection and a tribute to Robert Paul Wolff himself, as best we can offer it without having known him personally. His voice, sharp and stubborn and searching, gave us the questions. Now we carry them forward. That concludes this episode of Peace is Here. You can learn more at avaskolfsbeck.com, where I share updates on this podcast and my books, including the newly released novella Mano Mutante, a story about food, friendship, and finding peace in the soy-soaked heart of industrial ag Iowa. I write best friend activist short fiction in my Peter the Water Dog Saves the Planet 6-book series. Coming up next, more thinkers, more peace pairings, and more bold questions from the Wolff Peace series. This episode is human narrated by me, but was created with the help of AI, which has promised to let me know if it makes something up. So far, no confessions, but if you believe I've missed something, or if you just want to say hello, I'd love to hear from you. Podcast music is Dalai Lama Riding a Bike by Javier Peque Rodriguez. Links to his music on Spotify and Bandcamp are in the show notes. If you enjoyed this podcast, it really helps me if you subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts, or send it to a friend. I'm Avis Kolfsbeck, and I write the Pedro the Water Dog Saves the Planet book series, which are a series of environmental adventure novellas. Books 1 through 6 are available at all your favorite online bookstores or at avaskolfsbeck.com. Go to avaskolfsbeck.com to be notified when new books come out. Thank you again. Until next time, listen for the peace.